Okay, so this is the second lecture for diuretics. Okay, so the only topic left in diuretics was potassium sparing diuretics. Okay, so we will study the mechanism of potassium sparing diuretics in this lecture. So let's start. So potassium sparing diuretics. Okay, potassium sparing diuretics. If we talk about potassium sparing diuretics, then these are drugs or these are diuretics which interfere with the absorption of sodium ions, okay, and thus promote the excretion of sodium ions and preservation of potassium ions. Okay, so this is the definition for potassium sparing diuretics. So these are drugs which interfere with the absorption of sodium ions, thus promote the excretion of sodium and preservation of potassium ions. So this is what potassium sparing diuretics are, and these are of two types. These are of two types. Okay. These are two types. So the first type is sodium channels inhibitor. Sodium channels inhibitor or blockers, and second is aldosterone receptor antagonist. Okay, so these are two types of potassium sparing diuretics. You have to study mechanism of this and this separately. Okay, so on this will be focusing on, that is the mechanism of action sodium channel blocker or inhibitor and aldosterone receptor antagonist. Alright, so let's start with the mechanism of action sodium channel inhibitors. So sodium channel blockers or inhibitors. Okay. Sodium channel blockers or inhibitors. So we will understand this with the help of a diagram. Okay. So this is the diagram. Let me draw a diagram of nephron. This is the diagram of a nephron, and what happens in the membrane of DCT, the epithelial cells of DCT are called principal cells, PRINCIPLE, okay, principal cells, and in these principal cells there are few channels found, okay, and these channels are called, in these membrane of DCT, there is principal cells of DCT, there are few channels found, and these channels are called ENAC. Okay, these channels are called ENAC, that is, which stands for epithelial sodium channels. Okay, Na means sodium, so epithelial sodium channels. So what is the function of these epithelial sodium channels? The function of these epithelial sodium channels is to cause the transfer of Na, that is sodium ions, from the lumen of DCT into interstitial fluid. Okay, so this is the function of ENAC, that is epithelial sodium channels, that to cause the transport of sodium ions from the lumen of DCT into interstitial fluid. So as the name says, sodium channel blocker, so when these drugs will be administered, they will block this channel. Okay, so there will be no transport of sodium ions into the ENAC, into the interstitial fluid through ENAC, because ENAC has been blocked. So ultimately what this will lead to? This will lead to the movement of water into the lumen of DCT. Okay, and thus this will lead to the fact that more and more urine will be produced. Okay, So these are the function of mechanism of action of sodium channel blocker. So for example, amiloride. Okay. So this drug works like this. This is the mechanism of action of this drug, sodium channel blocker. So inverted, that is amiloride. Okay. Now we will study the mechanism of action of aldosterone receptor antagonist. So last topic in diuretics. Okay. Alright. So you have got aldosterone receptor antagonist. Okay. Next topic which you got is aldosterone receptor antagonist. Okay. So we talk about aldosterone receptor antagonist. Then, as you know, aldosterone is released by the adrenal cortex. It is a mineralocorticoid released by adrenal cortex. Okay. So it will be released by adrenal cortex, and what will happen is it will travel via blood to the renal epithelial cells and will bind to this receptor on the renal epithelial cells, which are called MR. Mineralocorticoid receptors. It will bind to receptor that are called mineralocorticoid receptors, and then it will bind to receptor that is mineralocorticoid receptor plus aldosterone. It will lead to the formation of AIP. Okay? That is called aldosterone induced proteins. Okay. So what will happen is aldosterone will be released by adrenal cortex. It will bind to its receptor called mineralocorticoid receptor found in the membrane of renal epithelial cells. When aldosterone will bind to its mineralocorticoid receptor, it will lead to formation of AIP, that is aldosterone induced protein. And the function of this aldosterone induced protein is to increase the number of ENAC. Okay. The function of this is to increase the number of ENAC. So as you know, if ENAC will be increased, so there will be more and more transfer of sodium ions from the lumen of DCT into the interstitial fluid. So when these drugs are administered, aldosterone receptor antagonists, when these are administered, so these will block this mineralocorticoid receptor. They will act at here. At this stage, it will block this mineralocorticoid receptor, and aldosterone will not be able to bind to this receptor, and this whole cycle will not take place. There will be no information AIP, there will be no increase in number of ENAC, and thus there will be no transfer of sodium ions from the lumen of DCT into the interstitial fluid. So this is how aldosterone receptor antagonist work. Thank you.